Well, howdy YouTube family. It is Bolt CRNA coming to you with another week's topic. This week, we are going to be talking about what were my stats to get into CRNA school, how did I get in so fast, what was my path to getting there, and can you replicate the same thing? Now, a lot of people like to focus on your GPA. So what was my overall GPA? I actually only had a 3.34. So my overall GPA for my whole BSN, not that great. And I hope that gives you a little bit of hope, because a lot of you guys feel like your GPA has to be extremely high or a 4.0 just to get in. Not really true. They look at your application as like a whole package deal. So you make up a whole bunch of pieces of the pie, and your GPA is just one part of that. So my overall, not that great. Now, where I did do pretty good is I knew my sciences would be important for grad school. So I did really focus hard on my sciences, meaning microbiology, anatomy and physiology, 1 and 2, biology 101, chemistry. I took a human dissection course as an extracurricular, and in all of those classes I made an A in undergrad. So I had a 4.0 science GPA, which a lot of people will tell you your science GPA is much more important to CRNA school than just your cumulative GPA, because your cumulative GPA can be made up of English, literature, history, psychology, a lot of random typed classes that some people can take throughout their undergrad to either boost or mess up their GPA. And so they're really more interested in specifically your sciences, because that closely correlates to what the majority of your program will be made up of. In CRNA school is mostly science. Another thing that a lot of schools used to require you to have, but not so much anymore, is the GRE. Now the GRE, even some schools still do ask for it, so keep that in mind, but there's a lot of schools out there now who say, it's not important, so you may be lucky and you may get to bypass it. Those of you who do need to take it, it's a difficult exam, it's kind of expensive, it takes a lot of time studying, it's a very broad exam, maybe like the SATs, but grad school level version of SATs, where it's just a very broad test to analyze your testing ability. It really has nothing to do with medicine, nursing, healthcare, anything science related, completely off base from anything we've studied mostly or spent most of your time doing. So it'll feel kind of off to most of you when you take it, and you probably won't feel very well prepared unless you studied a lot in advance, which is why a lot of programs just ask you to do mediocre on it. And I did. I had a 302, which is a very middle ground average score for my GRE. My combined score was a 302. And I had a 4 or 4.5 writing, which is just slightly above average writing score. So that was it, and that was fine for my program. So that's kind of your academic piece of the pie of what they're going to be looking at for you when they're looking to accept people to their program. But what's the other elements? Another element, a big important one, is clinical experience. CRNA school is unique amongst other types of APRN programs because it does require mandatory critical care experience before you're allowed to apply. So they do look at that experience. They do want to understand how high was the acuity of your patients? What types of ICUs were you working in? Did you get broad kind of experience where you understand how to manage neuro type patients and cardiac type patients and surgical patients and all of these different types of pathophysiologies that go on within the body? Or did you just stay in one spot the whole time? I happen to have worked in CV ICU, I did a cardiac ICU at one point, I did a neuro ICU, I did surgical ICU, and I did a medical ICU, and a little bit of trauma, but not a lot. I never did burns, I never did pediatrics, I never did ECMO either. So a lot of people who do CVICU will end up doing ECMO. I never did ECMO. We didn't do ECMO at the hospital that I did CV at. I did do a travel nurse contract at a CVICU where they did ECMO, and so I saw ECMO and I helped a little bit with ECMO patients, but I never was primary on any of those patients. So I never claimed I understood how to do ECMO or manage that really. Which is normal. Most your applicants are not going to have had experience directly managing ECMO. That's kind of a niche area. What about charge nurse experience or leadership type abilities? They love to see that kind of stuff in the clinical arena. They like to see that you didn't just go in and clock out every day. So I did have a little bit of charge nurse experience. Honestly, it was on a critical care travel contract. at a facility that was so short, they needed night shift charge relief, and I had about 3 years of experience at the time, and I was just the most experienced person there at that time. So they just pretty much begged me, please be the charge nurse on nights. And I was nervous to do so, but I went ahead and did it. So I was a charge nurse for a little bit. I kind of understood how to manage the unit a little, but I certainly was not like an experienced charge nurse. So I never on my application claimed to be experienced in charge nurse, but I did say I did some, relief charge nursing. And also precepting. They like to see that you can train other new grad ICU nurses, or even nurses who are transferring from a med-surg floor or the ER, and they're coming into the ICU, and they need to be kind of oriented and trained on how to manage the ICU and the drips and the different types of nuances to what you do as an ICU nurse. And so I had done that multiple times. So they like to see that you've precepted other people. So I mentioned the acuity of the patients. They want to see, it does not have to be a level 1 trauma center. A lot of people get that confused in their head, that level 1 trauma center is what everyone's looking for. Not really. I mean, trauma, your trauma level is not really that relevant to CRNA school. There's not a whole lot of trauma that we do in anesthesiology, maybe a little bit, but that's not our main focus. What a lot of people I think get confused about is when you consider yourself a level 1 trauma center, it means that you're going to be seeing sicker, high acuity patients, because you're going to be seeing a lot of different types of patients, lots of machinery, lots of that type of higher level care, which means you're going to see, the types of patients CRNA school wants you to see. A level 2 trauma center may also see a lot of high acuity type patients as well. So I don't want people to get caught up between the differences and the nuances between level 1 versus level 2 and which one's better or worse. Your ICU may be better at a level 2 trauma center versus a level 1 trauma center in the way that you get to think, or your autonomy, or some of the equipment you're using, or some of the opportunities you may have at that center versus the other. So don't get caught up in the trauma level so much. Now, once you start branching down to like level 3 trauma and level, beyond that, I don't even know if there is anything level beyond that, but that means it's probably such a small unit or a much more rural hospital that they're probably not going to be seeing as high acuity as you want. So that may be a warning sign to you. So honestly, you need to be looking mostly at the acuity of the patients. How sick are these people? Are we doing intra-aortic balloon pumps? Are we using CRRT? Are we doing ECMO at this facility? Are we doing heart transplants? Are we doing rotoprone beds and proning patients, which I know since COVID, proning is super common everywhere. But before COVID, it wasn't that common to prone patients in the ICU. There was usually a specialty rotoprone bed that you had to buy, and you had to be like specially trained on it, and there was a lot of different things you did with it that was unique. But nowadays, I know everybody just flipped on their face, and everybody out there's done it before. They look for you to have had those kind of unique high acuity experience. Me personally, I had 2 years as a staff nurse as a new grad in the ICU, where I was part of the rapid response team, and I precepted people, and I tried to get involved in some of the community things that we did in our hospital, and I also tried to get involved in like committee work and taking care of, are we decreasing our catheter associated UTIs on the unit, keeping up with fall risk for the unit, asking the manager if they need any assistance with whatever types of management things that they have. There's always little projects they're working on. They want the nurses to kind of be involved in and be kind of their eyes and ears and a little bit of the research assistance. So I tried to help with all that stuff on the unit. Then I went travel nursing. I did 2 years traveling, which is how I got a lot of different broad spectrum of ICU experience, because I got to travel a lot of different types of ICUs and see a lot of different types of situations. A lot of people will ask me, is it a bad thing to be a travel nurse? Not necessarily. Some CRNA programs may view it as a little flaky, a little flighty. Other programs may look at it like you're versatile. I think it's really just going to be heavily dependent on the vibe they get off of you when they talk to you in the interview. If they're talking to you and they're looking at your CV and your resume, and you're coming off very odd and flaky, and your life seems kind of disheveled, and you look like you're not quite put together, and you're not interviewing well, maybe they get a bad feeling from you and think you're not going to be a good fit for you. And the other situation would be you show up and they realize you're very put together and very, structured, and you have a very good head on your shoulders and they trust you. And in that sense, they think maybe you are like one of the great travel nurses that just like to go travel the world and see different places and make good money, but also are a high quality ICU nurse. For certifications, the only certification that they really ask for is your CCRN, and that's the one that I had. I had my CCRN. They don't really ask you for anything additional, and I haven't heard from any professors before that they like to see just a ton of extra random certifications that they don't ask you for. I had my CCRN, which they expected and they liked. And of course, you're all gonna have PALS and BLS and ACLS and NHSS, stroke scale and all that kind of stuff. That's considered standard. And clinically, you're also gonna want 3 strong letters of recommendation. You're gonna want one from an anesthesia personnel who you shadowed so that they can kind of speak to the way that you behaved with them while you were shadowing that CRNA or physician anesthesiologist in the OR, in the anesthesia L&D area, wherever you were shadowing that day. You're gonna want one from a nurse manager typically, and you're gonna want one from an educator usually. So what's the third thing that they're looking at? Beyond clinical and academics, what else are they looking at? They're looking at extracurriculars. They expect that you've had something unique or interesting about you. You've done something in your community, you've done community outreach or work, you've done a blood drive, or you've done medical mission trips, or something that kind of speaks to who you are as a person, and that you just go above and beyond just the normal go to work, clock in, clock out, go home, don't care about anything else. They kind of want to see your personality. Part of something that was passionate for me was a friend of mine who was a nurse practitioner at my church. They had a local clinic that was for patients who were pretty much homeless, the indigent and homeless who just had no Medicare. They didn't even have, they couldn't keep up with the paperwork for Medicaid or Medicare or their home address or anything like that. So they really only had medical care if someone offered it just free, like walking off the streets. And so it was volunteer basis. They had NPs that volunteered to treat the patients, and they had nurses like myself who would come in and do maybe once a week. I'd come in 5 or 6 hours and do some triage work and do blood pressures and go get an inhaler out of the closet that was donated by somebody who didn't want it or use it, and give it to a homeless person who needs an inhaler for their asthma. So that's kind of what I did for a while, and that was something that kind of showed my own personal interest, and CRNA programs like to see that. Did a pre-med internship through UAB. It was something that before I decided I was going to do CRNA school, I didn't know much about CRNAs back then, but I did sign up for a med school internship. I got selected for one, so I did that. They pick 20 people per year in the state of Alabama to do one through UAB, and so I spent a summer doing that. That kind of prepped me a little bit and gave me a little bit of extra insider knowledge and perspective on the provider role and modern healthcare in America and things like that. So that was my stats for when I got into CRNA school. Granted, these are just the stats that get you your invitation to come in and interview with them. So your interview is, I want to say your interview is way more important than what you have down on that paper. They're going to ask you emotional intelligence questions. They're going to quiz you about a lot of stuff that you have in your CV, and if some of the things you're saying don't match up, or if they're just not getting a good feeling from you during the interview, it's most likely they won't pick you. So the interview is vitally important, and I definitely flubbed up the interview the first time I interviewed at a CRNA program, and I got turned away. I got told, hey, your CV looks great, but we just don't feel like you'd be a good fit for us. And it probably was because I put my foot in my mouth a few times and did things that I just didn't realize would be a problem in an interview. But now looking back, I'm humiliated that I would do or say certain things that I did, but that is why I offer you guys the mock interviews. So I do mock interviews and I do strategy sessions for those of you who are not quite ready for the interview phase. Maybe you're a couple years out and you're still trying to, get yourself ready, but you want to be on the right track for when you go to CRNA school. Those are, I call strategy sessions, but mock interviews are for those of you guys who are like, in 3 weeks, you've got the interview date set, you're ready to go, and you really want like that real simulation of what it's like to interview for CRNA school. I offer that for you guys. I'll try and leave the link below so you can sign up for those if you need it. If you are not part of the memberships and you're wanting to join up, go ahead over to the membership tab on my page and join up for the memberships, because I offer the study guide over there for you guys who are looking to get into school. I also offer weekly or monthly exclusive behind the scenes videos with kind of some insider knowledge and information I try and share that might be a little more sensitive. That's more private videos for those of you guys who want to join up with that. And I also offer on the Ketamine Kings level a shout out once a month, which reminds me, time to shout out the Ketamine Kings. You guys are the true MVPs because your money and donations help to fund this channel and help pay for the camera and the equipment and for me to keep doing all these videos for you. So I want to shout you out: Seben George, Cynthia Almonte, Matthew Welters, Andrew Rockenhouse, Christina Rossi, Hayden Hinton, Danielle Manginelli, Stephanie Klein, Freddie Chen, Liberame, Justin McMahon, Cassia Lysek, Kendra Lepar, Hunter Wilson, Callie Dolan, Brian Thomas, Zara Rashid, Ariel Guib, Alexandra Tweedy, Matthew Snodgrass, and Tyler Chandley. You guys are awesome. Thanks so much for all your donations. Don't forget to follow me over on Instagram and TikTok. It's Bolt CRNA over there. Click this video or this video if you're looking for more stuff about CRNA, anesthesiology, or any random thing that this algorithm tells you you want to see. And until next time, that's Bolt out.